Hollow Knight is one of those games that needs no introduction. For the past 9 years, it has been a forefront of not only the indie gaming community, but the achievement hunting one as well. Infamous for not one, but two punishingly difficult achievements, it was clear that I would have my work cut out for me. At least, that's what I would say if I hadn't completed Hollow Knight 2 years ago. Prior to the Evil Within, I had gone out of my way to explore every nook and cranny of Hollow Knight and complete every challenge the game had to offer. Most notably, Embrace the Void, for surviving the relentless onslaught of all 42 bosses in a singular boss rush, and the subject of today's video, Steel Heart, for completing the entire game in Steel Soul, permadeath, with 100% game completion. With the footage of my Steel Heart run sitting on my hard drive recorded and ready to go, and because Silksong has been out for 8 months now, I figured now would be as good a time as any to finally share the video that I should have made a while ago. So, without further ado, here is my experience with Hollow Knight's Steel Heart run. From the moment my little nubbins hit the ground of King's Pass, I had a plan on how I wanted to start off my playthrough, and it all began with a goal of saving up 1800 Geo. For those that don't know, Geo is the currency used throughout the game, and the reason I needed so much of it so early on was so I could unlock the most expensive early game item, the Lumafly Lantern. With the lantern unlocked, I could then venture into the darkest depths without worry, because I could then see where I was going. Unfortunately for me, the resident shopkeeper of Dirtmouth was not in his business or the town, which meant I had to venture into the nearby well and explore the forgotten crossroads for any trace of him. Along the way, I made sure to free any easily accessible grubs, which I could then return to the Grub Father for a large sum of Geo, among other rewards, depending on how many grubs I freed. Eventually, I came across the Gruzmother, a large bumbling bug that wouldn't let me pass without a fight. Upon exterminating its entire lineage, I was granted access to a collection of destroyed huts, one of which happened to be housing the shopkeeper, Sly. Continuing onward throughout the crossroads, I made my way into the arena with the False Knight, the true first boss of Hollow Knight. My rewards for conquering the first hurdle? A chest full of Geo and the city crest, which would aid me in unlocking the City of Tears later on. Not only that, but defeating the Big Lug also allowed access to the Snail Shaman, who taught me the first spell of the run, Vengeful Spirit. After showing that I seemed to know what I was doing, I was able to enter the next major area of the game, the creatively named Green Path. Unlike the crossroads that preceded it, Green Path was full of, well, green. And vats of acid, but mostly vegetation. Exactly like the crossroads before, I followed the pathway around and freed any easily accessible grubs while keeping my eyes peeled for any other items that contributed to game completion. One notable encounter I had that didn't count for any percentage was with the Hunter, a shadowy figure who gave me a journal to document the 150 plus enemies I had and would encounter throughout this playthrough. Continuing to follow the path brought me to Zote, struggling in the jaws of a Vengefly. Now, technically, I didn't have to save him, but because I assumed that I had to, I did. I didn't stay and chat with Zote afterward. I just killed the Vengefly, took its money, and made my way to the prime encounter of Greenpath, Miss Silksong herself, Hornet. Defeating Hornet gave me the Mothwing Cloak, which now granted me the ability to dash and explore much faster. Not long after, I took a downward path that brought me through Fog Canyon and into the Queen's Station. I noticed that I had enough Geo to not only purchase the first stag station of my run, but the Lumafly lantern as well. As soon as the last stag was summoned, I immediately made my way back to Sly and Dirtmouth and made off with the lantern. Returning back to the Queen's Station, I found my way into the next main area of the game, the Fungal Wastes. After dealing with mushrooms of all shapes and sizes, I made a beeline for the Leg Eater. Despite the fact that he had a less than pleasing name, Leg Eater had some of the most overpowered charms available in Steel Soul, including Fragile Strength, which boosted base nail damage by 50%, and Fragile Heart, which would grant me 2 extra masks of damage. The reason they're fragile is because the bearer isn't allowed to die with them equipped, otherwise they would shatter and become useless. Fortunately, this worked really well with the permadeath condition in Steel Soul. Right before I made contact with him, though, I realized that I had nowhere near enough Geo to do business with him, so I took a detour into the Mantis village to get the Mantis Claw. With the newfound ability to wall jump, I rescued Bretta and began making my rounds throughout Fungal Wastes to get Geo for Leg Eater. With everything I had explained about him, one would think that the most obvious choice would be Fragile Strength, a charm that, again, boosted base nail damage by 50%. And it's not like I was too poor to afford it when I came back. Instead, I opted for Fragile Heart, because Steel Heart was a marathon, not a quick sprint to the finish, and I needed all the extra HP I could get my hands on. Since I had just enough to buy Fragile Greed, each charm owned contributing a percentage to completion, I took my leave of Leg Eater and proceeded onward to the entrance of the City of Tears. Remember that dinky little crest after defeating the False Knight? Now was its time to shine. With the door sealing shut behind me, I began making my way through the ornately decorated walls and elevators. Eventually finding my way to the nailsmith, who offered to strengthen my nail for 250 Geo. At this point in time, there wasn't all that much else I could do in the City of Tears, so I began making my way towards the city storeroom station. After paying 200 Geo, I made my way back to the Forgotten Crossroads so I could finally get to the pathway that required the Lumafly lantern. This pathway led me to my least favorite area to traverse, the Crystal Peak. All of the early game areas combined didn't give me nearly as much trouble as Crystal Peak did. So, the moment I was able to shut down the mining operation and grab the crystal heart for a super dash, I happily continued onward and fell down into the resting grounds. Moments later, I encountered the monument that informed me where the dreamers were laying, finally giving me a concrete start on my main mission for the game's basic ending. Interacting with the monument forced me into a dream that was then interrupted by a golden moth that provided me with the dream nail, a tool that helped me encounter boss battles within the ethereal plane. In simpler terms, the dream nail allowed me to access more bosses for more game completion percentage. My first dream fight was against Zero, and upon his defeat, I gathered 100 essence that could be used for later rewards. I navigated back to the city storeroom station before riding the last stag back to the Forgotten Crossroads to do a little exploration and geo roundup for Sly. After returning to Sly and Dirtmouth, I returned his shop key to him after I located it in Crystal Peaks and unlocked a whole slew of items for purchase. The main item that I was looking for was the Elegant Key. This key would unlock a power upgrade for my Vengeful Spirit spell once I made my return to the City of Tears and entered a new subsection known as the Soul Sanctum. Upon my arrival to this new area, I had to battle my way through tons of enemies. Before being greeted by the main attraction, the Soul Master. Upon his defeat, I unlocked the Desolate Dive ability, and made my way towards the gate that required the Elegant Key. Inside was a snail shaman that, once disturbed, upgraded my Vengeful Spirit to the Shade Soul, which now meant Soul Blast did twice as much damage. Unlocking the Shadow variant reminded me that one existed for all spells in the game, and it just so happened that I remembered where the next shaman was for Desolate Dive's upgrade. Unfortunately, I had to make my way through Crystal Peaks. Fortunately, I just had to smack open the crystal and release the snail shaman's essence to consume Descending Dark. By this point in the game, I decided that my next upgrade for mobility's sake would be the Monarch Wings, which would allow me to double jump. I just had to navigate to the Ancient Basin in order to unlock it. In order to get there, I had to enter the heart of the City of Tears. So, I left the shaman's crystal mound and proceeded to the resting grounds, and opened a secret passageway through a crypt that led me into the western half of the city. Taking a detour into the depths below of the City of Tears eventually led me towards the Broken Vessel, a final guardian of sorts for the Monarch Wings.
死んでいる。
Making my way out of Ancient Basin with my newly acquired ability, I decided to make my way to Kingdom's Edge, where Miss Silksong awaited for a rematch.
ヘガーレガシャーシャーシャーシャーシャーシャーニーナシャーシャーシャーシャーシャーシャー
Upon her defeat, I claimed the king's brand and proceeded to explore the surrounding area. Before returning to the Ancient Basin and unlocking a subsection known as the Abyss. There wasn't too much that occurred down here aside from big story implications and an upgrade known as the Shade Cloak, which granted the knight a few iframes during his dash, with the condition of a cooldown. With everything I could have unlocked in the Abyss at this point, I began making my way back up through the Ancient Basin, but not before snagging a nearby pale ore. I then made my way all the way back to the nailsmith on the eastern side of the City of Tears, and purchased the second nail upgrade for 800 geo and the single pale ore. With this upgrade, I felt confident enough to enter the Royal Waterways. For the uninitiated, the Royal Waterways just suck to explore. Not because of the design of the area. Like most of Hallownest, the world building is phenomenal, but rather because of how tedious certain enemies are to deal with. I, however, was more than capable of exploring this area with all of the enhancements I had done prior to entering. My first goal was to take out the Dung Defender. With him out of the way, I could then take his crest and use it to unlock a pathway into Yzma's Grove, which would allow me to access Yzma's Tear, which would then give me the ability to swim through acid unharmed. Remember how I mentioned tedious enemies? These things... The flukes are why I came prepared. And it was beyond satisfying to destroy the fluke marm with little to no struggle. With that out of the way, I decided to run over to the junk pit and release the Godseeker. I had no intention of doing the Pantheons, especially not after the torment that was the fifth one, but I thought of it as more of a contingency plan, in case I had no other way to get my game percentage up. From the junk pit, I decided to get the Howling Wraith spell in Queen's Gardens. Before I got there, I made my way through the recently infected crossroads, took a secret pathway into Fog Canyon, navigated through the clusters of jellyfish in a bug game for some odd reason, and entered the Queen's Garden. Not long after, I located the overgrown mound and claimed the Howling Wraiths. Like the Shade Cloak before it, it was now time for me to navigate to the Abyss and upgrade Howling Wraiths to the Abyss Shriek. In between my journey for the Abyss Shriek, I did a bunch of exploring. I then remembered that I totally forgot about the Mantis Lords towards the bottom of the fungal wastes and went back to kick their asses. I spent a good majority of this playthrough building up my mobility and ability early on, so that way, going after the Dreamers would be a piece of cake. Assuming I had every major upgrade I could have acquired in my arsenal, I began by going after Monomon the Teacher in the Teacher's Archives within Fog Canyon. After dealing with Umu, I finally destroyed the first of the 3 Dreamers, blocking off the final encounter of the game. My next target was Hera the Beast in the Beast Den of Deep Nest. I had been purposefully putting off this encounter due to how dangerous Deep Nest was. Fortunately, navigating to and eventually vanquishing Hera was not a problem. With 2 of the 3 Dreamers down, I decided to start exploring these areas, and areas I've been to before, to gather as much percentage as I could. I even managed to collect 2 pale ore and upgraded the nail again for 2000 geo and those 2 lumps of metal. After this, I decided to go after the third and final Dreamer, Lurien the Watcher, within the tower on the western side of the City of Tears. In any normal playthrough, Lurien is one of the toughest Dreamers to access because of the Watcher Knights defending him. Traditionally, there are 6 of them blocking the player's way towards Lurien. However, one of them is violently allergic to a chandelier falling on his head, making the fight much more manageable. I came overpowered to this fight and absolutely obliterated them. With the third Dreamer destroyed, it was now just a matter of cleaning up and exploring every nook and cranny of Hallownest to 100% completion. Trying to think of things I hadn't done yet, I decided to check out the Coliseum of Fools and entered the first 2 rounds. I ignored the existence of the third round entirely because I knew for certain that I would have messed it up. They don't call it the Trial of the Fool for nothing. Afterwards, I decided to fight Lostkin, Soul Tyrant, and Failed Champion for Essence. Thank God I encountered these 3 within the Pantheons prior to this playthrough. Because I practiced them so much, I got through each of them on the first try. I then fought Nosk, claimed the Pale Ore at the end of his arena, and then almost choked the entire run to Markoth. I don't care if it's a cliche in the Hollow Knight community. Markoth sucks. As a pellet cleanser, I navigated to the Tower of Love, fought the Collector, and obtained the Collector's map, which revealed the location of the remaining grubs I had yet to find. All things considered, I was pretty good at finding the grubs over the course of my playthrough, and there were only a small handful that remained. I eventually found my way to the hive, collected all the grubs that were there, and fought the Hive Knight. After that, I was almost exclusively looking for grubs. The problem was I struggled getting to them, even with the Collector's map. I decided to put a pin in my grub search, where my exploration brought me to the Queen's Garden, where I eventually remembered the existence of the Traitor Lord, and even got some assistance from a fellow traveler. R.I.P. Cloth, you will be missed. My reward for defeating the Traitor Lord was an audience with the White Lady, who offered me half of the White Fragment and brought me to 98% game completion. I then recalled that I had obtained enough Pale Ore at this point to upgrade the nail to its final form, the Pale Nail. Even after all of this, I was only at 99% game completion. Then I remembered my contingency plan, the Junk Pit. Even though I swore I would never play the Pantheons after the torment that was Pantheon 5, I knew I just had to beat the first Pantheon.
Final.
With my game completion at 100%, all that was left was the Hollow Knight. Before I knew it, I was done, and Steel Heart was complete. Crazily enough, it only took 10 hours to do, though to be fair, when I was playing it, it felt substantially longer. So, the question you've probably been asking yourself, do I recommend this challenge? Honestly, I do. Hollow Knight is one of those games that I would give anything to experience blind again. After I had agonized over the fifth Pantheon, Steelheart was a chance for me to remind myself why I fell in love with this game in the first place. The atmosphere and sense of adventure that I felt returning to the Kingdom of Hallownest genuinely made me happy, even though there was a lot to remember and keep track of. Despite this, I firmly believe it was a fair and thoroughly entertaining challenge. Plus, I get to look forward to Silksong. I bet it's going to be just as awesome, if not more. With all of that being said, I'm Raging Bull 2008, and thank you so much for watching. See ya!